my purpose for doing this class is in my local area, my nearest bike practice is an hour and a half drive away. So I'm quite keen on getting something closer set up. And I thought, to do this, what I need is to get some loaner armour together. And for the loaner armour, it's either going to cost me some money or take me some time. And at the minute, I'm very short of time with having a young family and that. So I thought, right, I'm going to search around and see if I can, there's commercially available stuff which can help me in my quest to get a couple of sets of loaner armour together and will save me some time. And looking on the KnightShop, which is a UK-based supplier, they've got some helmets which they claim are SCA legal. So I thought I'd get some and give them a test out. And the purpose of this class is all about going through the issues around helmets, making sure that we know what we're talking about and what we need to do to make these things actually safe. Because like most things, like most bits of armour, they're not immediately usable just out of the box. Right? They do require a bit of tweaking and a bit of modification to make them safe. So I'm going to start off by talking through the issues around helmets, the issues around head protections, from an SCA rules perspective and also sensibility, because if you walked out onto a battlefield wearing SCA minimum armour, you were entitled to do so, but it would be foolish and you would probably walk away feeling quite sore afterwards. So without further ado. So here is the link to the KnightShop, and as I'll go through the lecture, I'm going to switch between presentation mode and a show and tell, so you can actually see the equipment, and we'll discuss the issues around it. So, firstly, SCA helmet regulations. To my mind, there's a bit of a gap in these regulations, and the gap is where it says that you shouldn't be able to be hit in the head with a stick. And they talk about it in different ways, but it still leaves it fairly open to interpretation. So we all know we need at least 16 gauge steel, 1.6 millimeters, which in practical modern terms means that we'll be buying 2 millimeter thick steel to make helmets out of, or 14 gauge, because modern imperial sheet steel is at 1.5 millimeters, and this is before you've done any forming on it or any polishing. Also, you find that 16 gauge helmets tend to deform quite quickly unless they're made of fancy steel, and so I would always say to people 14 gauge is where we start. 12 gauge is just probably too heavy for us, particularly for if you don't have a big super strong neck. 12 gauge helmets get very, very heavy, particularly when you start adding aventails and things to them. Now, when you're building these things, they can be welded, brazed or riveted. It doesn't really matter. They've got to be securely attached together, and there are minimum spacings for the rivets, and there's also material should be non-work hardening. Can't make them out of things like titanium and stuff because it's too light. You can make them out of bronze if you want to, because it's the mass that really matters. But realistically, for most of us, the easiest way if you're going to make them is to buy some 14 gauge mild steel sheet and bash it into shape. We already know about the face guards, that we shouldn't be able to get a 1-inch dowel into anywhere into the face region, and that the face guard should come to below the chin. The minimum thickness of the bars, 4.8 millimeters, or 3.18 millimeters if the less than 2-inch spacing between the crossbars. Normally, I would use 6 millimeters, 1/4-inch bars, because they're strong enough to withstand the impacts. Whereas I think anything smaller than that is a bit weedy. Movable visors need to be secured so they can't pop open. I mean, for obvious reasons. Normally, people would have two mechanisms for closing, either like a pop catch on each side or a sneck hook and a strap. So here we have, you see on one side of this helmet here, we have a little sneck hook, which just drops in there and pulls the visor secure. By itself, you see that's only a little bit of wire, really, a little bit of bent wire. So I wouldn't be happy with that for my own head. So and on the other side, it's got strap and buckle. There are a number of ways of doing this, but two mechanisms or a solid strap going all the way around the back would be my preferred solution. This might seem obvious, but no major internal projections, and so next part, talk about padding. So we need like at least ½ inch of padding. Okay, now we don't really define the padding any further than that into what padding should be. Now, not all paddings are created equal. If you get high density foam, it doesn't compress so much. If you get low density foam, it compresses a lot. And depending on which helmet style you have, like the foam that doesn't compress basically just makes your head bounce quickly. Foam that's too soft will basically make the helmet bounce into your head. So the modern military and the Battle of Nations type people use combinations of suspension liners and padding. And the idea of the suspension liner is that when something hits your head, the helmet moves first, and the helmet weighs like mine weighs 5 kilos. So the time the 1 and a bit kilo sword has hit my 5 kilo helmet, and that started to bounce a little bit, then any residual motion as the helmet connects to the padding, and then the shock to my head is then much minimized. Whereas if I had fairly hard foam that goes straight to my head, then that shock goes straight to my head. So suspension liners and padding combinations, probably the best way to go. And only having ½ inch of padding space in your helmet, while again it is acceptable and legal to be on the field, it is just not sensible. It's always worthwhile having a bit of extra padding. Remember, we've had one of our members had a bleed on the brain caused by repeated head impacts. Now, whether this was entirely from SCA combat or from other stuff he's done in his life, we'll never know. But it's a serious thing, and it might not get you on the day, it might get you some years later. So like, for instance, my helmet padding is, which we'll discuss later, is considerably thicker. And I think for any I would make for anybody else would be much thicker than that. Chin straps. So chin strap or equivalent measure. Normally, for nearly all the helmets I've seen, we use like a chin cup strap, and that can be attached in different ways to the helmet, which we'll discuss later. For some of the period helmets, like grand bassinets and stuff, which can actually just attach directly to your chest armor, and your head can basically move entirely inside the helmet without ever needing any sort of chin strap at all. But I've never seen one done in the SCA. And if anybody has seen one and wants to share me some pictures, I'll be delighted. See the regulation about the chin strap shall be a minimum of ½ inch in width. But we don't really define what it needs to be made out of, because again, not all materials are created equal, and it could be. Does that mean it's thin leather, thick leather? Is it fabric? Whatever. But we don't really define it. I normally use like strapping leather, which is sort of 3 mm thick veg tan, with which gives me very good and solid stretch, but it can actually be a bit uncomfortable there around here. So I end up sometimes sewing a softer lining leather on the inside just to protect my face a little bit. Now, helms are one thing, but to protecting from the shoulders up, it's not just the helmet that matters. We'll get to some pictures in a bit. Sorry, this bit of the class is a little bit dull. It's all about the regulations. We've got some pictures and stuff later we can talk about. It's not necessarily just the helmet. Okay, it's the interaction between the helmet and the rest of it which determines whether you're safe all around here. Okay, and you'll see on some of the pictures where things I can see, well, I'm definitely not safe. But if you've got a helmet style you love, you can make a gorget or bevel or other neck protection to fit it. But the key thing is that you often need to make your gorget to fit your helmet rather than buying just a standard pattern and then finding out actually you've got big gaps everywhere. It's kind of sad to turn up to fight and not be able to fight because you've got too big a gap in your helmet. In my humble opinion, for the bassinets, which are ubiquitous in the SCA, the Aventail and gorget combination is by far the best. The Aventail really stops anything coming in there, and with a padded gorget underneath, you're pretty safe from even heaviest blows. Some people we might recognise here. Here's his Grace, and he wears two fabric coifs, a male coif over the top, and then he plonks a great helm over the top of that. And you can see there he's got steel gorget in addition. So he is solidly protected all the way around. This is a Viscount Duncan with a really nice coif integrated into his steel helmet. So for padding, he has a mouse mat glued to the inside of his helm. And then inside of that, he's made a padded hat, which is detachable and washable. His coif is securely attached all the way around his helmet, and obviously underneath the coif at the back, that's all steel under there, and so it's actually very, very well. He's completely protected, and his neck is effectively impossible to hurt him. So I've got Aventail on bassinet. Now this bassinet fits me quite closely. It actually comes down quite far on my neck as well. And it's got obviously a fairly large Aventail on it. I probably don't need a gorget underneath to protect my front. I do need something at the back, but I could do something else. But personally, I just like having the gorget. I'd like having the gorget when it's got a steel throat protector and a double reinforcing at the back to it. Because there's some things that are just not worth taking the risk with. Now, my helmet liner is completely detachable. It's canvas outer, linen inner, 16 layers of cotton batting. That's over the years has compacted down, like we talked about in the class on gambesons. So a few years ago, as I realised my padding was contracting a bit, I actually put some strips of foam around the brow band to give myself a bit of extra. And that's worked pretty well, and that helmet padding's lasted nearly 10 years, but I think it's probably coming up for replacement now. So now we're going to say we want to buy a hat, okay? And we know we've got all these options. So, so when you're looking at them and just looking at somebody's website, buying something that's just off the shelf, not custom made for you, they normally just specify a circumference. And so these ones here that I've purchased are either 61 centimeters or 64 centimeters. So I just realized I've made a mistake here. The minimum size is your head circumference plus 6.2 centimeters. Because that gives you at least just over a centimeter on each side. Now, what you will find is that if you buy the one that is just too small, that's much worse than buying the next size up. So always buy the next size up. Always fill it up with extra padding, because that's just the most sensible way to do. Obviously, if you can get a helmet that's custom fit to you, then brilliant. But these helmets here are £164 to buy, whereas a custom helm could easily be 2 or 3 times that. And and particularly if you're looking to help set up a group and stuff, you need to keep costs down. Buy some larger ones, buy a large one, buy a small one, and because you'll get people turning up all different sizes. And I've actually purchased like a medium-sized one and a large-sized one. And it turns out that either one of them would fit me, but the medium-sized one just doesn't get enough padding in it to make it comfortable for me. Right, I'm just going to go back to helmets. Right, this is the helmets that I've bought. I bought 2 of them, and you can see, we've got here space for attaching an aventail, which is probably going to do. We've got detachable visors, and we've got really quite nice, like, pattern on the visor itself, and then nice little touch is a locking pin to hold the visor up, which is really handy for when you're giving new people water or wanting to teach them or talk to them. Now I deliberately chose helmets with full face visors because with the group I would like to help set up, I want people to be having a more authentic medieval experience rather than a like the open face standard that we use, which is, there's no real reason for that other than my own preference, and I was buying the hats. So also, if it gets difficult for people, I can always just make a new visor and replace it with a bar grill if I want to do other things, because I know I could modify them. But I did actually just really like the look of this grill. I thought it's really sweet. Now, these helmets are made of 14 gauge, 2mm thick steel, and they're not that heavy. I mean, they're just, these are a couple of kilos. If I added an aventail to it, obviously add a little bit more, but it's a nice weight. It's not too heavy, not too light, and it's I'm quite a fan. I think for 160 quid, it was well worth the investment. It's not 100% safe to use right out of the box. Okay, and we'll go through some more pictures. Cool. So they sell loads of models which would be suitable. So I stole these pictures off their website, and you can see the prices of them. So the ones we've got there is a Battle Bassinet 14 gauge, 160 quid. But the Sherberg pig face, there's a few other bassinets and other styles of helmets which should be suitable. And this is really the first time that in the UK that we've had people who are selling helmets which were really customizable for us with very little effort, just a few tools and a little bit of know-how, and it's easy to make them work. Right, now, this is not me slagging them off, okay? Because I think these are good helmets, and I'm quite happy to support them. I'd recommend other people buy them if they were looking for helmets that look really authentic and are easily available. However, despite what they say, they're not suitable for SCA use straight out of the box. And the 2 main reasons: the padding is not sufficient to ensure compliance with the rules and keep your head intact, and I'll show you that in a second. And the chin straps provided are not suitable for SCA combat. So here's a couple of pictures of the padding. So it is, it's nicely made, it's nicely finished, but it's just too thin. And you can see where the chin straps coming through. You can see the polyester padding that's exposed. And if you can see where I've squished it there, it's only actually a few millimeters thick. Now, the top of it works really well as a suspension liner. And that bit's good, and I would definitely keep that. But around the sides, it's far too thin and far too squishy. So inside the helmet, see if I can get a good angle on this. You can see just from there how thick that padding really is. Comparison with my fingers, and also really very, very light, squishy. Doesn't take anything really to compress it at all. So by itself, that isn't suitable. But as you can see, it's really nicely sewed in. It's actually it's constructed quite well. And this suspension liner at the top there is a nice detail, and it actually is really useful for adjusting the height of the helmet for different people. So having these 4 tabs with the string, just by tightening or loosening the string, I can raise the helmet up and down, which is obviously really important if you're using helmets with precise eye slots like these, and for different people who've got different shaped heads and different size foreheads. So that's a really nice detail, but padding is just too soft. So what I am going to do with these is, here I have a yoga mat that's nice, and this is a nice thick one. It's about 10 millimeters thick. And it's a bit too soft, squishy, and stretchy for actual yoga use, but brilliant for supplementary helmet padding for helmets that are not quite sufficient. So I'm literally going to, all I'm going to do to make it suitable to correct the padding problem is cut a strip of this, probably 4 or 5 centimeters wide, okay? And then actually put it around the sides underneath the padding, and I'll just glue it in with double-sided carpet tape, and then that'll stay in there forever. And then what you then have got, you've got a nice combination between padding, suspension liner, and a nice fabric bit next to people's heads, because what people never told me when I was making my first helmets is that using this kind of stuff to pad your helmets is great, but it is really sweaty and horrible. Whereas having a fabric lined helmet is so much nicer to wear. And honestly, I think my helmet liner is the greatest thing I ever made for myself or anybody else in the SCA, because it's made my fighting life so much more pleasant. I'm just going to go back to sharing the screen. Well, before I go back to sharing here, does anybody have any questions so far?
This is probably best discussed at the end. It's just that I'm looking at the price tag of that, and it is so small that it makes me nervous. Mm-hmm. But I mean, obviously, you're saying that it's a good piece. Obviously, you haven't tried them in combat yet.
No.
Yeah.
No. But
I got a question. If you were buying that for yourself, would you think you'd get away with a nicely padded coif as part of your helmet padding instead of having to adjust the existing liner?
I'd have to put in quite a thick coif, I think. I mean, if it was for myself, I would say yeah, maybe yes. And I'd basically make a second hat to go inside the one that was already there.
Yeah.
I'd make it the same way I had, but I'd make sure it was at least 10, 12 millimeters thick in addition to what was there.
Yeah. Okay.
And actually that would work quite nicely, because so I could take it out and wash it, theoretically, obviously. So a bit further to Agnes's question, I can see that the steelwork construction is good. I can feel that the welds are good. I can see that there's no gaps or there's no inclusions in where it's been welded. So from a construction point of view, it looks good. With these visored helmets, the bits that are going to go first is where the hinges are and the actual visor itself, because they're the vulnerable bits. So they're the bits I'm expecting to have to replace in a few years' time.
That's it.
Chin straps. Right, you can see me trying to find it on with a chin strap there. And that chin strap basically garrots me. it's just entirely unsuitable for SCA combat. So what I am going to do with that is basically just cut that chin strap out and replace it with a chin cup. Now, if I'm making this for myself, I will put in a leather chin strap that attaches to 2 points and has leather straps coming down to a single point with 2 O-rings and then a chin cup. So that bit of that strap basically goes like that on me, which is just not ideal for you, and any sort of impact in the face is just going to garrot me. So I need to move the cup to here. Now, the way I'm going to make the cup, so just got 2 different color leather straps here, just for indication purposes. But basically, you end up with this type of affair, okay, where you can see I've got 2 bits of leather coming into one there, about there, and then out here, then it will come to 2 attachment points, one kind of horizontal below my ear and one up just above my ear. And what that does is the one above my ear keeps the helmet down, right? And the one back there, right, stops the helmet being pushed into my face. And then this here will have a buckle on it, but probably a buckle on each side for adjustment purposes, and then I'll be able to take it on and off. For loaner helmets, what I would do is make a similar cup like this, and then but actually use strings instead, because the strings give it a bit more flexibility for those. But if you're going to be changing over helmets between different people, a really common mistake I see with people making it is they make these cups too small. And if you make the cup too small, what it does is it doesn't really stay on your chin so well. A more generous cup is definitely beneficial for comfort, if nothing else. Okay, you can see it have a ruler somewhere, but that is that strap there's just about as long as my hand. I haven't measured that up. These are just 2 random bits of leather out of my toolkit. Right, so this is me trying on one of the helmets and doing the, can you tilt your head back? Can you tilt your head forward? Can you tilt your head side to side? And you can see, without aventail on, right, there is some gaps on the front, but without aventail and proper chin strap, there's some gaps on the front, but the front is probably all right. There's no gaps at the back with my gorget, that looks fine. But the one on the side, see, there's quite a big hole there that I could easily get the tip of a stick into. So this gorget design, as it is not suitable for this helmet, as it is. So what am I going to do? Well, what are my solutions to this problem is? Well, firstly, I can modify the gorget. You can see at the front of the gorget, I've got a steel reinforcing plate with a plate that comes out under the chin. That's to stop anything skiffing off my body armor and going up and clacking me in the jaw. I could extend that around and make it out of leather or steel. And I've seen people with almost like a cone coming off their neck, coming up really high to protect their face. The other thing I would do is put an aventail on it. And the aventail is probably the best looking solution. And the aventail will completely stop any stick being able to get up under there, because you'd have to hit so hard, you'd have to lift the whole aventail up in there, which probably not possible, or sufficiently unlikely to be not worthwhile considering as a risk.
Without looking at that, like actually right here, I have a suspicion that this may be one of those wacky ones that is actually very technically legal, you know, assuming that you can't, I don't have a stick here, assuming that you can't cut and connect to your skin that way. Like, you know, you were saying that, you know, you can get your tip of the sword in there. Absolutely, you can. I can see it, you know, very easily. We had one of those here in Dawne, and apparently it is legal if you can trust into it, which I find problematic in a number of different ways. So yeah, absolutely cover it with something.
And this is and that's what I said about the beginning, about the daft bit about the regulations, where there's nowhere in it which says, like, if you could be hitting the head with it with a stick, the helmet's not suitable. But it is what it is. Yeah, I think the gap here is so big that it wouldn't even be technically legal. But you know, maybe if I had a shorter neck, it would be. But even so, nav and tail would be is more than advisable here.
Alex,
Yep.
that's quite often a problem, isn't it, with helmets? That you've got the front is open, and this. So what are so you can hang an Aventail from it. I believe some people put on the gorget a plate, which is almost like a bevel, which comes up in front. Are there any other solutions? What's the typical solution for the problem?
Well, I do options 1 and 2. So you see on my gorget there on the right hand side, you can see the bevel plate on it, and in every single gorget I've made has that. But that's because nearly all the helmets we use are the bassinet type helmets, or helmets with a faceplate come down like that. Obviously, if you're wearing an armé or a close helm, it's not a problem, but they're much rarer in the SCA. But yeah, Aventail really is my go-to solution for all these type of problems.
Yeah, thanks.
Right. So longevity, as we briefly talked about this before. So longer lasting normally means heavier. Okay? Your gear is going to get battered over the years, particularly if you fight a lot and if you enjoy it. Like bars are going to get bent if you've got a grill. Hinges are going to break. Hinge pins are going to get bent. You know, so if you want it to last longer, it normally means you have to buy heavier gear. Now, none of us are professional knights in our real life, so and very few of us have jobs which require us to be as physically fit as and strong as a real knight is. So, what that means is that if your gear is too heavy, it's obstructive to you, and you don't win very much if you are fighting your own gear, as Agnes showed us this morning. Now, so what you need to really do is say, well, we've got to have this balance, and the balance is always a bit tricky to find, isn't it? It's always easy to argue in an extreme position than the moderate position. But with armour, it works a lot better if you can carry it and move around effectively. Like if you're looking at those sort of 16th century full suits, and they're like 35 kilos worth of armour, there's very few people can move and fight in that for any sort of length of time. And if you go back earlier, I mean, I'm pretty big, strong and fit. My armour is 25 kilos. And I think that's probably on the upper end of what I would recommend for anybody to wear. You can get away with much, much less than that. So that's why I say, buying 12 gauge helmets, all that means is you're going to get a sore neck. Like having coats of plates that are too heavy just slows you down. So I would say buy as light a weight as sensibly possible. It's likely that you'll want to replace your armour in a few years, except if you're Alexander, maybe wants to keep the same plate for coats of plates for 40 years. But so don't worry too much about how long things are going to last. If it meets the regulations, it will last long enough. If you want to wear it because it looks cool and it meets regulations, even better. There isn't really an optimum style. And if you look at all the Dukes in Drachenwald, and you'll see they've all got very different equipment. They're all very different sizes and shapes. So what that says to me, as somebody who likes and makes armour, is that all of these things are possible, and basically just go with what you think is cool. And that's it. So now it is time for questions.
Yeah, another question per se, but just wanted to support you. I fully agree with you on the helmet weights. I've had 2 helmets, which I then used during fighter practice on and off, and one was a lot lighter than the other one, and I just felt also the mental implications on the energy level and how much you want to move if I'm wearing the lighter one. It was 2 millimeters, so it's still fine, but yeah, it can make an impact also on your fighting and how you enjoy fighting. Because I know there's a trend to go heavier, because that also protects, but I think there's a limit practicality wise.
Well, as you see the difference in Alessandra since she got her new coat of plates, and that just shaved just over 3 kilos of her armor weight, which is, and she moves a lot better. She gets down on knees and get up again quicker. She's doing like cross-body shots and things, which I don't think I've ever seen her before, just for the sake of a couple of kilos. Like Duke Williams said, he's very, very focused on making sure that his armor does not restrict him. And because he said, well, if he loses a fight, he wants it to be entirely his fault, not his equipment's. And like Anya said this morning, when you first start off, you just don't know what it's meant to feel like, and you don't know, is this good, is this bad? What it feels is hot, uncomfortable, and scary because somebody's about to hit me with a stick. But even for me, like sort of 18 years into the SCA, so my new gambeson I've just made is much more, allows me to do much more movement than my old gambeson. And so there's a whole load of things that I couldn't never really do in my old gambeson that I can do in my new gambeson, and I didn't know that, and I'm an experienced fighter. So that's why I think that's one of the reasons why I'm quite keen now on saying regularly replace and update your equipment, because your knowledge like does improve. And I know Alexander and I were having a disagreement before, but his coat of plates is cool. Right? He made that really well. Right? He's patterned it well. He used solid leather, and he hasn't really changed shape at all. And it's one of those garments that's really flexible. But for things that are more subtle, like joint armor and helmets, like when you become more experienced, you just see different stuff, don't you? With £100 options from John. Are you sure? Well, I'll have to check. So, are the £100 options? Are they the bassonets, or are they the sugar loaves? Because there was some sugar loaves for £100, and I looked at them and I thought I just wanted something where I could open up a visor for somebody who was new. Maybe give them a drink of water, and quite a lot of it was just really the cool factor as well. But yeah, but those sugar loaves with the they do look pretty cool, but didn't have the same sort of flexibility. And that was it, really, just a matter of personal preference. They do, but no, that's it, personal preference.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it now. And they look fine. Yeah, that's actually a really good price for a starter helm.
Yeah. As like I was saying, it is so good a price that it's making me suspicious. But if it works and if it doesn't kill anybody, then super fantastic.
Yeah, I would imagine, like Alex has found, it's going to need completely repadding and strapping. But so long as it actually the circumference is the only dimension that's mentioned. So whether it's long enough, I mean, it looks at it from the pictures, whether it's long enough to actually reach your shoulders, that kind of thing. But it does look very nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's making me want a bassinet again now.
I would say if it was mine, I would want more rivets in the front of it, and perhaps around the side. I would want to. It depends, because it's not clear whether it's welded or not. If it's a welded construction and it's got rivets in for sure, that's fine. If it's just got rivets in for construction, I would want more rivets. But that's actually a really easy fix. So I would say, you know, you're going to have to do some work to make it usable. I would say it's within the bounds.
Got a little question from Wee Barbarian about the Taekwondo head protection. Says yes, that is definitely more than thick enough, and the Taekwondo head protections are pretty good for going inside helmets, as long as they do actually fit. You might find you have to shave a bit off the outside if it's particularly with the bits that go over the ears might stick with the helmet. Yeah, you chop the ears off. Yeah. With these, it's kind of almost a shame that they have padded and put the chin strap in, because it would work. It would work a lot better if it wasn't. And what's actually kind of interesting is that where these rivet holes are is like sort of probably about the right point for actually putting the proper chin strap rivets in. Except that one there is the hinge pin for the locking pin here. Yeah, but overall, I say that I am pretty delighted with this, and I think, you know, if you're starting off a group and you wanted and you need some equipment and you're not a professional armourer, but you're got some DIY skills, then you could definitely do a lot worse than buying this or one of its brethren from the KnightShop.
You know, and for loaner gear, I'm betting, what would you suggest? Because you need something which, you know, is easily changeable between persons, isn't it? Because, well, I had a couple, but of course everything was fit for me. So how do you deal with it?
What I was thinking of for those particular ones is to make coifs, like washable coifs. So somebody puts a coif on first, and then at the end of practice, you can just stick them in a washing machine and everything else.
Yeah. So effectively go for a suspension liner sort of setup, and then a padded coif, which various thicknesses, which people can put on, and then.
Well, for those, no, I mean, for those ones, I'm just going to put foam on the inside. But I mean, for the actual people wearing them, just maybe like a 1 or 2 layer coif that goes over their heads, so they're sweating into that rather than directly into the helmet liner. But for the stuff where we've, I mean, with our groups where we loan out helmets, people normally end up keeping them for blooming years, so they don't need to be changed over much. But going forward, I think we have to be a bit more. Might have to do more changing over.
How much time do you think you need, somebody unexperienced needs to spend on it before it's able to work?
I think if you hadn't done it before, it would take you between half a day and a day to, and most of that will be spent on getting the chin strap right. If you've done it a few times, it'll be just a couple of hours. And obviously, the thing that will take people time is that fundamentally you've got to drill holes into your new shiny helmet you've just bought, and nobody likes doing that.